are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. So before we get started, let's just go over our confidentiality.
Okay.
And whatever you say will stay in this room between both of us.
Okay.
Unless you're going to hurt yourself or hurt others or somebody is going to hurt you.
Okay.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what's been going on and what brings you here today.
At work, I was assigned this big presentation to give, which on one hand is really great because they chose me to give it, and I guess that's nice, and that's a good thing. But on the other hand, it's horrible and it's horrifying because I have to stand in front of a group of a lot of people and speak. And when I think about that, I'm just so stressed and anxious, and I just feel like I'm going to do horrible, and I don't know why they picked me to do it. It's just really overwhelming, and the presentation's in a few weeks, and I don't know how I'm possibly going to get prepared in time to do a good job.
Okay, so it sounds like you're having a lot of stress and fear,
Yes.
anxiety about giving this speech in front of other people.
Right.
So you have the fear of giving public presentations.
Yes, and I know that I know the material, and I feel like I understand what I'm speaking about. But having to get up in front of everybody, and they're all looking at me, and they're all waiting for me to screw up, or I am screwing up, or all of it is just so overwhelming and stressful.
So it sounds to me like you have a lot of these thoughts of people looking at you, you're going to mess up, you're going to fail, and you're anxious and stressed because of all this going on. And all of those thoughts would be irrational thoughts. And these are all negative things that you're thinking, and they're just not true to the situation. So this is all of your negative self-talk, and these are what we would call automatic thoughts. So as soon as you are told you're going to give a presentation, you automatically think,
I'm going to screw up. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to fail. It's going to be horrible. Why would you pick me? Oh, I think a lot of things.
So that's pretty much what you've been programming yourself to think. And that's why that's an automatic thought. So, and we can get over this by, I can show you about cognitive restructuring. And that's where you will tell me all of these irrational thoughts, we'll write them down. And then after we go through these irrational thoughts, we'll change them to see the more positive side of it, which would be the rational thought and what's actually going to happen rather than these irrational thoughts. So let's get started with before you're giving the presentation and how you feel before the presentation.
For the presentation, I feel like I am going to fail.
So you feel like you're going to fail.
Yes. I feel like I'm going to do poorly.
I'm going to do poorly.
I'm super anxious and nervous before I have to get up there. I can just see myself waiting to walk up on stage, just freaking out.
So you're anxious and you feel you're just going to fail. You're going to do poorly. All right, what about during the presentation? How do you feel?
During the presentation, I feel like I'm going to just completely screw everything up. I'm going to forget what I'm talking about and screw it up. Everyone's going to be staring at me. I can just feel their eyes staring at me, and while they're staring at me, I'm sure they're thinking that I'm screwing up and that I'm not doing a good job, and why was I picked to do this presentation?
So I'm not going to do a good job.
I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm just going to forget what I'm saying totally.
So I'm going to say everything wrong or forget. And you just feel like you're going to completely forget everything?
Yes, and then I'm just going to have to run off stage or something. I don't even know.
And what about after the presentation?
After the presentation, if I could ever even make it that far, after the presentation, I feel like I wasted all of their time. I embarrassed myself.
Embarrass yourself.
They shouldn't have picked me.
Why? Okay, so why did they pick you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Just
it sounds to me like you really know how you feel going into the presentation.
Yes.
You have all of the stress and anxiety and bad feelings about how you're going to do.
Yes, I see it happening in my head over and over.
And you're very aware of this, so you know what's going on. Okay, and these, from what I can tell, that they're all irrational thoughts. Okay. Because you are fully capable of giving the presentation and you know your material. Yes. Yeah, so now we're going to move on to the other side of the presentation with the coping thoughts to pretty much program you to have these coping thoughts occur instead of these negative thoughts that you've been having. All right. So we're going to try to make these coping thoughts turn into your automatic thoughts rather than having these negative, irrational thoughts always popping into your head. Yes. Okay, so let's start with before the presentation. You told me your first thought is that you're going to fail. Right. So a rational thought, a coping thought would be, I'm going to give a great presentation. Okay. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. We're going to write all these down for you.
I'm going to give a great presentation.
Yes. And by repeating things also and saying them out loud makes you believe them even more and makes you believe in yourself. Okay. Okay, so let's go on to your next one. I'm going to do poorly. Okay. So let's think of a coping thought instead of I'm going to do poorly.
Instead of thinking that I'm going to do poorly, I guess the opposite of that would be I'm going to do well.
Yes, I'm going to do well. Okay. Because you told me you know the presentation, you know the material. So the rational thought, instead of I'm going to do poorly, it would be I'm going to do well. Okay. Okay. All right, and I am not good enough for this presentation.
Well, I mean, they picked me, so I guess I'm a rational thought. They picked me, so I must be good enough to do it if they picked me.
They picked me, so I must be good enough. Good. Okay. All right. And now during the presentation, you mentioned you're going to screw everything up.
Right. Now, so the opposite of me screwing it all up. So instead of me screwing it all up, I am going to make a great presentation.
There we go. I'm going to make a great presentation. Okay. And then everyone is staring at you.
Okay. So instead of everyone is staring at me, maybe everyone is just listening to what I'm saying.
I mean, of course they are going to be watching you and listening to what you're saying, but when you say like staring at you, that's a little bit more, the way you said it makes it sound a little more negative.
But it was negative before.
So instead of them just staring and glaring at you, there you go. So they're going to be paying attention to you and listening to what you have to say and learning from you. Okay. So they will be learning. Yes. They will be learning from me.
It's way more positive than before.
Okay, good. Let's see. Another one of your negative thoughts, that you're going to blank out and forget everything that you're saying.
Yeah, that's the worst one. Okay, so instead of blanking out and forgetting everything, I am going to remember everything.
Okay. And also with that, you can go into it feeling that you're going to remember it, and you can also prepare yourself with notes and things like that. And that way you feel like you're getting off track, you can go back to your notes and look at your notes. But you have to keep that positive coping thought that you are going to remember everything, and you know that you have those notes there.
Okay.
Okay, and then after the presentation, you mentioned that you did horribly.
Yes. So if I'm not doing horribly after the presentation, then I guess I would be doing, I did perfectly.
I did perfectly. Great. Okay, and I wasted everybody's time was another one of your thoughts.
Okay. So I didn't waste their time, or I made good use of their time.
I didn't waste their time. I made good use of their time. Okay. And then another thing that you told me was that I don't know why they would pick me to give the presentation.
Okay. So, well, I mean, they picked me because I know what I'm talking about.
So you know what you're talking about. So I know what I'm talking about, and that's why they picked me. Okay. Let me just get this all down so you will have it. Okay. So after writing all these coping thoughts, do you recognize a pattern with the coping thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, now that I see it, what I am saying, when I first got here, what I was saying, I really didn't have any basis to say it on. I was just assuming, I guess, the worst case scenario, which is, now that you pointed out, I can see that that doesn't really make much sense. You know, when I look at the positive thoughts that we came up with, those are just as likely to happen. So I can see that, gosh, that presentation on that side is way better than the one that I came in with, you know.
Okay, good. So, so you can see how for each negative, irrational thought, there is a rational thought that goes with that.
Yes.
So over time, we will work on replacing these negative thoughts with these rational thoughts.
Okay.
And another thing that we can do also is to reframe this whole situation.
Okay.
Basically by looking at it from another point of view, as rather than going into the presentation thinking you're going to fail, you'll go into the presentation with a different point of view. What kind of point of view can you see?
I would go into it trying to think about it going well and making it something that's positive and doable versus horrible.
Okay, so can you tell me more about what your presentation would look like as you come up to the stage with all these people looking at you?
Okay.
And tell me about how you feel before
the
presentation.
Just think for a second. So.
And I also have these coping thoughts that can help you.
Okay. So before I get up on stage, I am thinking that I'm going to do a good job.
You can do a good job.
Yes, and I'm prepared for the presentation. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be able to do it, and I'm prepared. Okay. And then as I get on stage, I am seeing everyone look at me, and I'm thinking that they're just paying attention to me. It's the polite thing to do during presentation, and they're listening to me, and I'm remembering what I'm supposed to say, and they're listening and they're paying attention, and I'm remembering. And then at the end of the presentation, I see myself doing a good job, and everyone learned something, and they left and they told each other that that was valuable.
Okay.
And my bosses thought that I was a good choice for the presentation.
Okay, great. So you're able to see it from a different perspective now, rather than what you only saw before with your irrational thoughts.
Right.
Great. Okay.
It's much better that way.
Oh, good. All right. So basically, when you go home today, I would like you to start keeping track of your thoughts in a journal.
All right.
And every time you have a negative thought, just write down your negative thought. And if you do have that negative thought, come up with a coping thought that you can think of to change that negative thought.
Okay.
And if you have other positive thoughts, any sort of thoughts you have, just write them down in that journal, and then we will discuss them at our next session.
Okay.
And also I can give you this paper here.
Okay.
That way you have this as reference that you can look back to see these thoughts and focus on this side.
Okay. I could just like scratch this side.
And every morning, if you wake up and go over all of these positive coping thoughts, that will be helpful. Do you have any questions?
No, I feel like I'm going to say these to myself as much as possible. And if I think of something new that's freaking me out about my presentation, I'll write it down and try to think of a different way of thinking.
Yes, and then you could write that right next to it.
Okay.
And then we can discuss that when you come back.
That sounds perfect.
Okay.
I feel so much better already just thinking about it that way than before.
You did very well today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.